Here we go. Hello and welcome to a new video, and today it's an exciting one. It's the start of the new Scottish Premiership season, so I thought I'd have a go at a 1 to 12 predictions. For me, for any football supporter, this is the best time of the season. This is when you've got genuine hope that you'll be able to secure glory, achieve your goals, because nobody really knows how it's all going to transpire. There's a lot of new signings in the door, a lot of unknowns. So yeah, I'm going to make my predictions. I'm not the best at predictions myself, but I always like to have a stab at predicting the league table. So here goes. Here's my thoughts. It's very unpredictable. I think it's a very competitive season this year. I don't think there's going to be an awful lot between a lot of the teams. So I've kind of broken up the league into clusters. That's the way I've approached this in terms of where I think teams are going to be grouped throughout the table. Starting off at the bottom, I've picked out 4 teams that I think are going to be in trouble this year. And from these 4, I do expect 2 of these to be in the relegation spots, then the automatic relegation in 12th and the playoff spot in 11th. So starting off at the bottom, I'm actually going to go with St Johnstone, the newly promoted team. And this would be a change from the last couple of years, because 2 years ago, Dundee United got promoted from the Championship and finished 4th. Last year, Falkirk came up and finished 6th, so newly promoted sides have done really well. And don't get me wrong, I think St Johnstone have got a chance of coping well in this league. I like Simo Valakari as a manager. He's charismatic and he likes to play good football, so I think they'll be a good addition to the top flight. I just look at their squad, and to me it strikes me as a strong and good Championship squad, but I'm not necessarily sure how that's going to translate into bona fide Premiership quality. You know, some of their main signings so far have been good Championship players: Logan Chalmers from Partick Thistle, Matthew Todd from Dunfermline, very good players. But if you add that into a Championship winning side, I do worry as to whether they'll have enough to cope in what I think is a competitive league, as I've said. On the flip side, the counterpoint would be that Falkirk managed it last year. Falkirk had more or less the same players that came up from the Championship, and they coped very well, and they both play progressive styles of football. So I could be very wrong in this. I would just worry that with a lot of strong teams in there, I'm not sure if they've strengthened their squad enough yet to really be comfortable in the division, but I could be wrong in that. And as for 11th, I've gone for the other Saint, St Mirren, who finished 11th last year, so it would be the same position, and I'm not sure they've done enough yet in the market to suggest that they're going to be any stronger than that, because I think a key factor is also the manager, and I hope that Craig McLeish does well. He's a young Scottish manager, but he's a rookie, and his success when he came in as caretaker last year was mixed. They had some dodgy results, but they ultimately did survive, and he's looking to implement a more positive brand of football, it seems, at St Mirren. And I think as a rookie manager, trying to change a style and a squad that hasn't been overly strengthened, in my opinion, in the market, I think that's maybe a cocktail of a difficult campaign ahead. Having said that, they do still have a lot of good players at this level, such as Killian Phillips, who I think is one of the best midfielders in the league. You've got Alex Gogic, very experienced, Mika Mandron. They've got very strong players, but I think it's maybe got a bit stale at St Mirren. After winning the League Cup last year, Stephen Robinson, they weren't doing very well in the league before he left, and I just think that maybe they need a bit more quality added through the door if they're going to be comfortable in the division this year. As for 10th and 9th, the 2 other teams I think could potentially be in a bit of bother. 10th, I've got Dundee. Last year they did okay under Stephen Presley. There was a lot of question marks around his appointment. I think he proved a lot of people wrong. They ended up finishing 8th, which is comfortable from relegation fears. And I was actually impressed at what Elvis was able to implement at Dundee. I think there was a lot of young players. Again, they played a positive brand of football. But this year they have lost a lot of those top players from last year. Luke Graham, who's a great prospect for the national team as well, has gone down to Stoke City. Tony Ugans ended up at Aberdeen, and Cam Congreve's loan has also ended at Swansea. So that's 3 holes there for them to fill. And as of yet, I think their squad is looking light. I don't think they've made too much progress in the transfer market. But having said that, I do like what Presley's implemented there. The players seem to love him. I think they've got some good players in there. Ethan Hamilton, midfield, is a very strong, complete midfielder. Funnily enough, I actually played against him when I was younger at Hutchison Vale. He was capable back then of beating every man on the pitch before scoring, and you can see those range of attributes that led to Man United sending him as a youngster. And yeah, he was wearing the captain's armband last year, and he's a player to watch this year. And also in the League Cup group stages, 2 other Scots, Joe Bevan and Charlie Riley, who first played with each other at League 2 level in Albion Rovers. So for them to be reunited at the Scottish Premiership level is exciting, and they both have done really well in the League Cup. So yeah, I think Presley has definitely got good contacts down south. We saw that with the loan signings last year of Ugan and Congreve, and that comes from his time at Brentford. And I did say there that their squad looks light, but I back Presley in the next few weeks to unearth a few more gems, and I just think they'll have enough to avoid relegation bother, just about, but they could well be down there. Above them in ninth, I've got Falkirk, which is a drop-off from 6th last year. They punched above their weight last year. John McGlynn's an unbelievable manager. I think he's a strong candidate to be the next Scotland manager. I think people are a wee bit snobby when it comes to that shout, just because of his name, and maybe he's been around Scottish football a long time. People don't necessarily believe he's capable of that job, but if it's a meritocracy, I don't think there's too many Scottish managers out there have done a better job in recent years. In fact, there's no other better performance managerially, in my opinion, from a Scottish coach. But having said that, this Falkirk team's been decimated, really, well, in terms of their key men from last year, and that's always a byproduct of success at any level. Barney Stewart's gone down to West Brom. I think his goals were crucial in ensuring that Falkirk ended up in the top 6. Calvin Miller was their main creative force. He's gone to Hearts, and also Dylan Tate was a key cog in their midfields, moved on to Dundee United. So they're big losses for them. Philip Lissa as well, who impressed on loans. His loan period has ended. I think John McGlynn himself has acknowledged that it's going to be a big task for them this year, in the second season syndrome, if you like, and a big turnover of players. But they've also retained a lot of their important players from last year. Scott Bain, I think, is one of the better goalkeepers in the division. Liam Henderson, really reliable centre-back. Leon McCann. Brad Spencer, one of the best midfielders. I've already touched upon a few midfielders at some of these clubs here. Spencer at Falkirk, Hamilton at Dundee, Phillips at St Mirren. I think Spencer's right up there in terms of controller in the middle of the park. And I think Craig Sibbald coming to back to his hometown club from Dundee United will be a really valuable addition. Finn Yates is also a talented attacking midfielder, so I do think they've retained a lot of good players in there, and John McGlynn's definitely got an eye for a player, and I just rate him highly as a manager. So I think it's inevitable there'll be a drop-off just because I've lost some quality from last year, but I think they still will be safe from relegation danger just because they've got a really good manager in John McGlynn. So that's the bottom 4 that I think will struggle. I've got St Johnstone, St Mirren, Dundee and Falkirk. Then I've got a bit of a cluster of 5 teams that I think will be quite similar, neck and neck, and these could rotate in position. And it's hard to really distinguish between these, but there's 2 that I think will just be in the bottom 6, and they are in 8th place. I've got Kilmarnock. And as I've said, I think this next batch of 5 teams could be anywhere between 4th and 8th. Like, I think Kilmarnock are a bit of a dark horse for the top 6. I was impressed by how Neil McCann stabilised the team when he took over from Stuart Kettlewell last year. I think McCann, you can tell he's got stature as a manager, even though he's only a wee guy, but he will demand standards. He speaks well, he's articulate, and he'll take no nonsense, and you can see that from his Kilmarnock team, who ended the season very well to avoid relegation. Having said that, I think Finlay Curtis was their spark on loan from Rangers, did very well there, scored 5 goals, so I think that will be a big miss for them. But the reason why I think they will do pretty well this year is that Hugill and John Jules up front, both capable strikers if they're fit. And, if you've got a reliable presence up front, players that can get you goals in attack, I think that can go a long way. And there's also Eric Ring, who is arrived with a bit of pedigree, Swedish winger from Lincoln City. I've read good write-ups about him. And I just think Kelly will be stronger than what they were last year. They started, obviously, it was a struggle in the first half of the season. And I think Neil McCann has proven to be a solid appointment there. So I think they'll be safe from relegation danger, but perhaps they don't really have the quality, the depth of quality as some of the teams that I'm about to speak about. 7th is probably the biggest shock so far. I've been quite conservative in my predictions, but 7th I've actually got Hibs. I just feel with Hibs that perhaps it's got a bit stale under David Gray, which feels harsh to say because I've always rooted for David Gray because I like to see former players who have an affinity with the club do well as managers. He's a young Scottish manager as well, and I do think he's done a great job. I would just worry that perhaps things have got a bit stale last year. I think they actually did all right considering what they were compared to across the road. Obviously, if Hibs are finishing 5th and Hearts are challenging for the league, the context is difficult for a Hibs manager. But ultimately, I have always identified Hibs as a kind of free-flowing attacking team, in my lifetime anyway, getting forward, scoring goals, having flair players, great strikers. And this Hibs team just really isn't that. And one thing I'm a bit surprised about is it seems, certainly from the transfer business, that they're going to continue with a 3 at the back, a back 5 with wing-backs. Certainly there's not been too many wingers coming into the door. They've still got a lot of centre-backs, so I think that might stay the same. And that formation to me just lends itself to kind of counter-attack football, pragmatic football. And for me, Hibs should be a front-foot team. And I think if you're going to be a more pragmatic manager, it has to come with results. And that puts a bit of pressure on David Gray, whereas if you are a bit more free-flowing, then fans have a bit more patience with you. And I think, last year Hibs weren't a great team to watch, and so far with the business in the summer, as I've said, I'm not sure it's going to get too much better. So yeah, I think Gray could come under a bit of pressure, but at the same time I think the hierarchy will give him time, and that could lead to a frustrating season in my opinion. Because you look at their summer business, Jason Kerr's a great signing, a big Hibs fan, a local player. I think he'll do well, but I was expecting more signings from the middle to the front. Martin Boyle has been a talisman for Hibs, but he almost left the club because he's beyond his peak now. And Nathan Lowe, there's an awful lot of pressure on him to be the main provider of goals. They lost Bowie in January, and they don't really have a like-for-like replacement for him yet. Obviously, Lowe has been identified as that, it seems, but he's only really scored goals so far in his career at League 2 level in England, and we've seen a lot of players that have come up from England before struggle. Obviously, we've seen players do well, but Hibs have gone quite big on that market this summer. Also, Callum Wright coming in, and Adam Mayer as well. So I haven't been overly enamoured by their transfer business, and I think there's a lot of pressure at the top end of the pitch on Lowe to score goals, and also Owen Elding, who's looked very bright, but there's a lot of pressure on them because Boyle isn't quite the same player as he was. Having said this, I could be wrong in this because Hibs do have a lot of talent in the midfield too. If they're firing, Mulligan, who I'm very excited to see this season, given the number 8 shirt at Hibs, and Chaiwa, two very good players. But yeah, I just worry for Gray, and I worry that it's maybe gone a bit stale at Easter Road, and that's why I've got them, a shock finish of just missing out in the top 6 and 7th. As I said though, I think 8th to 4th is pretty tight. On to the top 6 then, I've got Dundee United in 6th. I've heard a lot of people maybe tipping them to be closer down to the bottom, but I just think that compared to this time last year, they look a lot more stable in terms of the squad. Last year they had a really high turnover. They signed a lot of players this summer, but I think it's quite normal now that a bunch of clubs have signed a lot of players. I think they've got good players all over the pitch. I like Yuri Yuvu at the back, big Moldovan defender. Dylan Tate's a great signing from Falkirk. Emmanuel Agie in midfield, Vichko Chevet. I also think Zach Sapsford. One of the tips for me this season is Sapsford at United is going to have a very good year. Last year he showed a lot of promise. He scored great goals against both halves of the Old Firm, and although the Old Firm last year were weak, it takes a good player to be scoring the calibre of goals that he was against Celtic and Rangers. So I think Sapsford, his second season, having come in from the A-League in Australia, I tip him to score a lot of goals and be easy on the eye. And I just think, I spoke there about Hibs not evolving from the back 3, whereas United, from their transfer business, it looks like they're going from a back 3 to a back 4, and I think it's a sign of Jim Goodwin being keen to evolve the team. I think Dylan Tate's going to mean that they're better on the ball than they were last year. He's very tidy on the ball, Dylan Tate. And if you look at United's results last year, they did actually really well against the top half. They were unbeaten at Tannadice against the Old Firm. Their problem was against the so-called weaker teams in the division at Tannadice, where they were struggling to break them down and getting hit on the brakes. So I think the Dylan Tate signing is quite symbolic of a change of approach at Tannadice. And Jesse Randall's another one to watch, who's come in with high pedigree from New Zealand. And I just think with Sapsford, as I've said, a player I rate, Randall in the final third, Dylan Tate making them more of a progressive team, I expect a decent season from Dundee United, and they're led by manager Jim Goodwin, who knows the league inside out. In 5th position, another manager who knows the league inside out is Stephen Robinson, who is leading Aberdeen this season. Again, Aberdeen, it's difficult to really predict where they're going to be. It's interesting that in the last 5 years, they spent 3 of them in the bottom 6, which for a team of Aberdeen's stature is nowhere near good enough. And last year was a terrible season. They ended up finishing 9th. I just think that Robinson is a safe pair of hands. He knows the league, as I've said. I think in recent years they've gone heavy on the foreign route in terms of the management and Jimmy Tilleen, and also the recruitment. They sent a lot of players from like Scandinavia and other parts of Europe, whereas I think Robinson's signings this summer have indicated that he wants to change the culture a bit, get a lot of guys in who know the league, such as 2 boys from Killie, Lewis Mayo, who's a good defender at this level, Brad Lyons, also Tony Ugan, who impressed at Dundee last year, Lewis Smith from Livingston. And I think that maybe changes the signing policy a bit. I also just think they've got good experience in there. I've touched upon there Mayo at the back. You've got Stuart Armstrong in midfield. And then Kevin Nisbet, I think, is a key player up front. If you've got somebody at the top end of the pitch who's a proven goal scorer and a reliable goal scorer, I think that can help you pick up results. It can help turn defeats into draws into wins. And Nisbet's got 6 goals in 4 League Cup matches, and I think he'll hit the 20-goal barrier in all competitions this season, maybe challenge for a Scotland place. So put all that together, a solid manager in Stephen Robinson, a reliable goal scorer up front in Kevin Nisbet, and a bit of experience at all ends of the pitch. I think Aberdeen will stabilise this year, but I don't think they've got quite enough to be challenging where they want to be yet, which is 3rd place in the league, 4th place in the league. I've got them in 5th. As for 4th, maybe somewhat of a shock considering some of the exits from the club in the summer, but I've got Motherwell. I just back the regime that's going on at Motherwell. I back the ethos at the club. They have been decimated like Falkirk. Teams that do well, punch above their weight, often they get poached. But they've lost Elijah Just, gone to Swansea. Got Elliot Watt's gone to Turkey with Samsunspor. Arguably the biggest loss of manager, Asko, has gone to Toulouse. But I just think that the vision at Motherwell comes from the top. Obviously, they replaced Asko with a manager who's cut from the same cloth in Alfred Johansson. And I think that the philosophy will remain the same. They'll look to play possession-oriented football. The recruitment is thinking outside the box. They've already signed guys, unknown guys from across Europe. Moorman at the back scored a screamer in Europe. Willie Vogt, who got 17 goal contributions in Switzerland's second tier. And I also think there'll be more business to come. Obviously, they made big money last year from Lennon Miller and this year from Just and Watt. So I expect more signings to come. And if they've got a strong recruitment team, which they've demonstrated, then if they've got more money to play with, I expect a high-calibre player to come in. And they've also retained a lot of their high-calibre players. Watt, I think, can be accounted for by Fadinger and Priestman in midfield, two very good midfield players. They've still got Maswanise, and if they keep him, he's got two attributes which are worth their weight in gold in any division: pace and goals. I think Said's always a threat. He'll get even better this season. So yeah, I think the culture at the club is really positive, and I think they're going to do well again this season. I don't think they'll be quite as high up in terms of challenging the top 2 and 3 as they were last year, but I expect them again to be in and around European contention, and I've got them finishing the same position as they did last year in 4th place. As for 3rd, I think they're in a bit of a league of their own. I think they will be a bit too strong for the teams below them, but I don't think they'll be where they were last year, which was challenging for the league title right up until the last day. It's Hearts. And this one even could be proven wrong. They obviously struggled in Europe so far, and that their team's been dismantled this summer with the departures of Derek McInnes as manager, and in the spine of their team you've got Lawrence Shankland and Cammy Devlin both going to Rangers, and Craig Halkett is going to be out for a long period of time with a serious injury. So it's very much a new look Hearts team led by a manager in Wouter Franken, who's got very good pedigree, Belgian manager of the year. I expect him to do well. He speaks well, but he's got a high turnover of players, a lot of Jamestown players coming in. And yeah, it's a very new look Hearts team, and they're in Europe to start the season. So I think it could be a struggle to start the year. I don't expect them to be challenging in the top 2. I think Celtic and Rangers are going to peel away from the Hearts challenge for this season, because I think it's a lot for Hearts to turn around. But I do trust the Hearts vision, the Jamestown vision. I do think that they've still got a lot of good players in there at the back. Guys like Harry Milnes, terrific left back. They've still got Kizaridis, Braga, and I think a lot of these guys that have come in, Renault, Calvin Miller, they're high calibre players, and I do think they will be better than their usual rivals in Hibs and Aberdeen. I still haven't seen enough from them in terms of their squad to suggest that they're going to be better than Hearts. So I've got Hearts in 3rd place. And then the top 2, I think we're going to have an old-fashioned title race between the two this season, which should be very entertaining. I don't think there'll be an awful lot between them. I think there'll be twists and turns. The top spot will have a different identity across the duration of the season. But ultimately, I've gone with Rangers in 2nd and Celtic in 1st. Rangers, I think I made a very good appointment at Derek McInnes. I think he'll do a good job there. I think he knows the club inside out. He knows Scottish football inside out. He'll maintain standards at Rangers. He knows what it takes to get results. I think his philosophy will tie in with what Rangers fans expect. He's often preferred a 4-4-2, physical, results-driven philosophy as opposed to swashbuckling football, 4-3-3, which is maybe more accustomed to the other side of Glasgow and Celtic. And they made some good signings. I think Shankland will score goals. He's proven that in the Scottish Premiership. But if you look at Shankland and Devlin being 2 of the kind of standout signings, I'm just not sure if that levels up in terms of what Celtic have got just yet. In terms of starting 11, I'll get onto that. Ben Godfrey and Emmanuel Fernandez, if they both stay fit, is a very strong centre-back partnership, I think, for this league. But I just look at the signings and I think they're solid signings, but I'm not sure if they're landscape changers. And ultimately why I've got Celtic in 1st over Rangers in 2nd is I still think, as things stand, if you look through the starting 11s, I think Celtic have just got more quality. You look at both the fullbacks, Kieran Tierney and Alistair Johnston. For me, they're arguably top half English Premier League players. I think they've still got Callum McGregor, who at Scottish Premiership level is very consistent. Obviously, they spent big money on Casper Hogue, who was scoring goals in the Champions League last year. Arna Engels, if Cameron Carter-Vickers is fit. I just think if you're to do a combined 11, Celtic have got more quality, and you're only as good as your players at the end of the day. But if you look at Celtic, they've got Callum McGregor, who has won so many trophies at Celtic. He knows what it takes to win week in, week out. Kieran Tierney, the same, over 2 spells at Celtic. So I just think if Celtic sign a few more players, which I expect them to do, I expect Rangers to do it as well, but I just think Rangers have got a bit more of a gap to bridge, and I think they need to sign more bona fide top-level players if they're to bridge the gap to Celtic. Having said that, Celtic, they've lost Dyes and Maida. They might lose more players, such as potentially Arne Engels, Nygren, Johnston. So that could change the landscape. All of these predictions could change a lot following the end of the transfer window. But as things stand, I think Celtic have still got a bit more quality. Martin O'Neill, there's question marks there about him. I'm not fully sure if he'll last the full season. He is very old, well into his 70s, and I'm surprised he took the job. But I think he does have the better squad, and he, like McInnes, will demand standards. He showed that when he came in last year. And yeah, I just expect Celtic to pit Rangers to the post in what should be a compelling title race and a compelling season overall. So there you go. There's my 1 to 12. I'm sure it'll be drastically wrong come the end of the season, but let me know what you think in the comments if you'd like to. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching this video. Cheers. Bye-bye.